Okay, here's a cinematic puzzle for you. Think about Norman Bates, Leatherface, and Buffalo Bill. Three distinct, really terrifying horror villains. Now, imagine one person's real-life pathology becoming the psychological foundation, the literal blueprint for all three.
Yeah, it's almost hard to believe one case could ripple out like that.
That's how profoundly disturbing this story is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are tracing the unsettling origins and the lasting cultural legacy of Ed Gein, the so-called Plainfield Ghoul. Our sources detail his extreme isolation, the decades of psychological tyranny he endured, and the crimes that not only shocked the nation but really forced Hollywood to redefine what fear looked like on screen.
That's right. Our mission here is to try and move past just the sensational headlines. We want to trace how an upbringing defined by intense psychological conflict, how it culminated in acts that were not just violent but fundamentally transformative. He was literally turning human life into household objects. We need to understand the catalyst, the specific psychological pressure cooker, really, that created this legend.
And that pressure cooker, it was the home environment. Ed Gein was born in 1906 in Wisconsin. Now, his father, George, he was an abusive alcoholic. But the true architect of Ed's mind, that was his mother, Augusta.
Yes. And what's fascinating here, or maybe chilling is a better word, is that Augusta's control was strategic, very deliberate. In 1914, she intentionally moved the family to this really secluded 155-acre farm near Plainfield.
Right, it wasn't an accident.
No, it was a calculated physical withdrawal. She wanted to create what you might call a hermetically sealed environment for her sons, Ed and Henry.
She saw the outside world as this cesspool of sin, is how she put it. And by moving them to a farm that didn't even have basic things like electricity or plumbing, she just deepened that physical and psychological separation from, well, reality.
Absolutely. And within those confines, she enforced this terrifying kind of tyranny. She weaponized her fanatical religiosity. She subjected Ed and his older brother Henry to just endless, relentless puritanical sermons. Her constant focus was on the innate sinfulness of humanity, and specifically the corrupting, damning evil of women. And, carnal desire, anything to do with the body was bad.
So she was the ultimate source of misogyny in his life.
Yeah.
But this creates the essential tragedy, right? This impossible psychological condition for Ed.
Exactly.
He was taught to despise all women as these instruments of evil. Yet at the same time, he cultivated this absolute, unwavering, almost idolizing devotion to his own mother.
It's a paradox. He needed her to live, emotionally speaking, but maybe subconsciously, he needed her to die to resolve that crushing internal conflict. He had to compartmentalize. He elevated Augusta to this unique, almost divine status, totally distinct from all other evil women.
That love-hate dynamic
Yeah.
that became the ticking time bomb inside him.
It really did.
And the person who maybe tried to diffuse it, or at least saw the danger, was his older brother, Henry.
Yeah, Henry was the only voice of dissent in that household. He apparently saw Ed's unhealthy attachment to Augusta and would openly challenge her, sometimes right in front of Ed.
That must have created tension.
Oh, undoubtedly. But the family unit, it started to collapse in the early 1940s. George, the father, died in 1940. And Henry's descent, well, it came to a very abrupt end.
This is the major turning point, isn't it? The event that really reinforced Gim's emerging pathology. Henry's death in 1944 during a marsh fire on the property. And our sources strongly suggest this death was highly suspicious.
Oh, suspicious is putting it mildly. They are glaringly suspicious circumstances. Ed supposedly went looking for Henry, and he led authorities directly to his brother's body. But the body was strangely untouched by the fire, yet the corpse had clear bruises on the head. Despite this, and, some pretty glaring inconsistencies in Ed's story, the death was officially ruled an accident. No autopsy was ever performed.
So the very isolation that Augusta engineered to keep sin out,
Yeah.
it actually functioned to keep his potential first crime in. It reinforced his sense of impunity, maybe? He learned that in isolated Plainfield, he was basically invisible. Capable of the ultimate act, perhaps, without consequence.
Exactly. You could definitely see it as his test run. If it was murder, he got away with it. And then the final destructive catalyst came just over a year later in December 1945. Augusta died after suffering a stroke.
And Ed nursed her during that time.
He did. He nursed her for about a year. After she died, he was utterly alone, adrift on that desolate farm.
And his immediate reaction, that chilling act of devotion, it's so telling, isn't it?
It really is.
He boarded up Augusta's bedroom and her sitting room. Just sealed them off. Preserved them exactly as they were when she died. creating this macabre shrine where his idealized mother remained perpetually frozen in time.
While the rest of the house fell into squalor.
Right, so with his external authority, his mother, gone, his internal obsession just took over completely. About 18 months later, so around 1947, the intense loneliness and this desperate need to somehow resurrect or replace Augusta, it drove him to the Plainfield Cemetery.
And his obsession escalated. It turned into grave robbing.
This wasn't about seeking valuables, though,
Yeah.
like jewelry or money. If he wasn't after that, what was he trying to get? What was he extracting from the earth during those, maybe up to 40 nocturnal visits between 47 and 52?
He was harvesting the raw material, human remains. He specifically targeted the bodies of recently deceased middle-aged women, women who, in his disturbed mind, resembled his mother.
How did he even find them?
He would track local obituaries, find the freshest graves. It was methodical.
And his ultimate goal?
Yeah.
It was physically manifested psychosis. Our sources say he wanted to collect enough female skin to create a woman's suit.
Yeah. A tangible, horrifying attempt to literally crawl back into his mother's skin somehow,
Wow.
to fill that massive void she left in his psyche.
But just digging up bodies wasn't enough eventually.
Apparently not. The static, decaying remains were no longer sufficient for his escalating psychological needs. That need for fresher material, combined with his growing confidence, may be born from getting away with Henry's death. It eventually pushed him across the line. From desecration to murder. This happened in the mid-1950s.
His first confirmed victim was Mary Hogan. She was a 54-year-old tavern owner who just vanished in 1954. All that was left was blood and a spent rifle cartridge. Her head was later found on his property.
Right. But the crime that finally brought everything to light, the one that ended his reign, was the disappearance of Bernice Worden. She was 58, owned the Plainfield hardware store. She went missing in November 1957.
And the clue was just mundane, almost.
Incredibly mundane. Investigators found the last receipt written at the hardware store before she vanished. It was for a gallon of antifreeze.
Sold to Ed Gein.
Sold to Ed Gein. That receipt led authorities straight to the farm.
And that's where Sheriff Art Schley and his deputies discovered, well, an unimaginable scene. In the shed, they found Bernice Worden's headless, eviscerated corpse. It was hanging upside down from a crossbeam. Prepared, as investigators starkly noted, like a deer.
Just horrific. But the shed, unbelievably, was just the introduction. When they moved into the main farmhouse, the state crime lab encountered something else entirely. A methodical, nightmarish workshop. This wasn't just evidence of murder. It was like a factory where human remains were systematically stripped of their meaning, their humanity, and turned into ordinary household objects.
It's the sheer labor involved in this transformation that just it boggles the mind. Our sources list dozens of specific items that showcase the depth of his pathology. Things like chairs upholstered in human skin, bowls made from the tops of human skulls, lampshades crafted from human faces.
It's a catalog of horrors, and then the personal artifacts, the ones that connect directly back to his mother complex. A belt made from female human nipples, a corset fashioned from a female torso, and of course, the primary object of his obsession, the woman's suit. A vest made from a female torso, complete with breasts.
That inventory is horrifyingly precise. So if the items weren't just random trophies, what was the psychological function of this terrifying transformation in his mind? Why do all this?
It seems it was ritualistic. A desperate, psychotic attempt to resolve that unbearable love-hate paradox he had for Augusta. He would kill women who resembled her in doing so, destroying the source of his pain, the impossible standard he could never meet. But then he would preserve their parts, bringing her back in a way, but this time under his absolute control. He was constructing a new mother.
So the sealed-off bedroom, that represented the idealized mother he worshipped, right? Frozen, perfect, untouchable.
Exactly.
And the rest of the house was his workshop, where he built this new, controllable, physical mother for himself out of parts.
Precisely. And the woman's suit itself, that was the ultimate manifestation of his identity crisis. A desire, perhaps, to become a woman himself, rooted in his mother's tyrannical pronouncements against femininity, and yet his simultaneous, desperate devotion to her. It merged his deepest fetishes with his fundamental need to fill that void she left.
It's staggering. And despite his low victim count, only 2 confirmed murders, Ed Gein's influence just skyrockets beyond his actual crimes. Because he provided the specific blueprint for a terrifyingly new type of horror villain.
The quiet neighbor.
Yeah, the quiet, unassuming neighbor next door. The monster built not by some supernatural force, but by his own dysfunctional family.
And Hollywood grabbed that blueprint almost instantly, didn't they? If we trace the cinematic trio you mentioned at the start, the lines of influence are just direct and incredibly clear.
Okay, let's start with the immediate impact.
Yeah.
Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, Norman Bates.
That's basically Gein's domestic psychodrama turned into a film masterpiece. You have the obsessive devotion to a dead, dominating mother, the preservation of her room as this immaculate shrine, and the final, horrifying act of adopting her persona to kill. It's a direct parallel. You can't miss it.
And maybe a bit more visceral, we have the Texas Chain Saw Massacre's Leatherface.
Yeah, the connection here is purely material and aesthetic, but it's powerful. Leatherface wears masks made of human skin, and he decorates his family's home with furniture made from bones and skin. That's a direct graphic echo of the inventory found in the Gein farmhouse.
Chillingly direct. And finally, The Silence of the Lambs' Jane Gumb, or Buffalo Bill.
Buffalo Bill's entire driving motivation, the central plot device of that film, is his project to create a woman's suit for himself using the skin of his female victims. That links directly back to Gein's own ultimate horrific project and his specific desire for physical transformation.
So, why does Gein endure in our cultural memory when maybe more prolific killers fade? You suggested it's because the quality of his crimes assaulted humanity on multiple sacred layers.
Yes, I think that's the unique insight here. He violated multiple fundamental human taboos simultaneously. He violated the taboo against taking life, obviously, but he compounded that by violating the graves of the dead, desecrating that final resting place, then desecrating the human form itself, and crucially, transforming sacred human subjects into profane, functional objects. That radical dehumanization, a skull becoming a bowl, skin becoming upholstery, it just cuts to the very core of our deepest anxieties about mortality, identity, and what it means to be human.
So what finally happened to the Plainfield Ghoul himself? Legally.
Well, Gein was found guilty of the murder of Bernice Worden, but he was almost immediately ruled not guilty by reason of insanity. His diagnosis was schizophrenia. He was institutionalized for the rest of his life. He actually died peacefully, almost ironically, in 1984. Apparently, he was a quiet model patient in the institution.
And the fate of his property. It speaks volumes too, doesn't it?
It really does. It speaks to the public's conflicting need to simultaneously obsess over his crimes and desperately try to erase his existence. His house mysteriously burned down in 1958. Arson was suspected, but never proven.
It was grave.
His headstone was eventually stolen, repeatedly vandalized before that, and now his grave remains unmarked today. Erased, in a way.
Which brings us to a final thought. What does it mean for our culture, for us, that we seem to rely on the darkest, most private pathologies of real individuals like Ed Gein to fuel our shared public nightmares? Think about how the truth of his life becomes the fiction of Norman Bates or Leatherface, and how that fiction in turn ultimately shapes and maybe even controls what we find terrifying. Something to consider. You've been listening to The Deep Dive. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.